athletes to entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a centralized platform for athletes to network and connect with other athletes and alumni. And this show is all about the transition out of sports. It's such a difficult thing between financial, mental health, just career services, a lot of challenges that athletes face. And so what we do is we interview former collegiate and professional athletes and talk about their transition out of sports, ultimately to successful entrepreneurship and business leadership. And it's all about teaching athletes that there is life after sports. So excited today to have Jason Price. How you doing, Jason?
Doing well, Rob. Great to be here. Excited for this conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be a great one. So like I always like these because Jason, like me, was a runner. Now a lot faster than me because I wasn't a sprinter. I was a distance runner, and a lot better than me because ultimately he was an All-American. But he went to USC, and that's the University of Southern California, because I know sometimes on the East Coast people call USC South Carolina, but the true USC, the Trojan. So he was a walk-on there, a track athlete, but ultimately became an All-American there. And then when he was done at USC, he transitioned into the finance world. He had an internship while he was in college, and just went to Wall Street and started working there and applying his skill set. Ultimately, he switched into the tech space and worked with some startups. And now he is a co-founder of NextPlayU, which we're going to hear more about. So, Jason, I always like to talk about playing sports growing up and how that shaped you leading up into college.
Sports were a great outlet for me growing up. It's interesting because I come from a family of athletes. So my grandfather was actually a boxer in DC, amateur, but engaged in it. And my dad had played high level basketball, as well as ended up having a short stint playing in the NFL. And so it was around me, but it was always ingrained in me from my parents. Fortunately, academics are going to get you there. You need to think about being well-rounded. So sports were a nice outlet for me with that in the background. And I basically tried everything growing up, from gymnastics to soccer to martial arts to basketball, and then ended up landing on track because it fit me. Rob, as runners as we are, learning how to love that pain. That was part of my journey. I don't think I chose the 400 meters. The 400 meters chose me. And I think a lot of 400 meter runners can say that, and ended up becoming good at it. Knew I wanted to run in college and take it as far as it could take me. And so I ended up walking on at USC and going on that journey.
That's great. And then, like, growing up, did you want to be a professional athlete? And if so, like, what sport?
I had initial inclinations. I liked basketball and football growing up. For me, I knew pretty early on that I wanted to be. I called it a global business leader. So I had that idea in my mind probably late high school. So I viewed track specifically as an avenue for that. And then as I started to have more and more success coming out of high school, I said, hey, how do I become the best at this? Going through my time at SC, going from a walk-on to becoming one of the captains, I think I topped out at top 15 in the US in the 400 meters, which was good. And I was proud of my progress, but it was nowhere near being a professional or really making a living at it. And then the track landscape is not quite like other sports. So I realized pretty quickly that I was going to be professional in something else. Although track was certainly part of my vehicle. And I loved everything that it instilled in me.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, and it's like you said, it's hard, and it does give you that perseverance and the work ethic and everything that we talk about as part of the athlete skill set. So let's talk about now you're in college, and again we talk about transition out of sports. Was there education there at USC as far as what athletes can do after sport, and not just like that one day workshop, but did they have any kind of program there when you were there, or if not, do you know if they do that today?
Somewhat. Rob. I was fortunate. I had a partial academic scholarship, and so I was able to straddle both mindsets of being a student athlete, both the student and the athlete. The programs on campus, they've evolved since then, but at the time, a lot of times it was you had your tutors and you had your support services, and it was really to keep you, a lot of times, keep people eligible, keep you in the game, so that yes, you're a student first, and I put that in quotes, but a lot of times the demands of being an athlete are so great that it becomes all consuming. So we had a student academic council that I was a representative on. There was events, but it was relatively limited. School was even at an elite institution like USC. A lot of times it's staying eligible, staying in the game, being able to compete at your sport at a high level, and a lot of times you don't have a lot of guidance on what is an authentic route for you. Where would you be the best in a profession beyond sport? There's just not a lot of time. You're consumed with all the pieces that it takes to stay in the game, keep your GPA up, and perform at that high level.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge is the timing. I know, like I talked to one guy on a previous podcast. He played football and at in college, and he said that in retrospect, it would have been great if he had maybe like a 4-week workshop or like a class a semester that they had to take. And I think to your point, it's difficult because of the demands on your time, especially elite athletes. But I think it's so important to have that. And like one of the things that, excuse me, that we've talked about as a company is working together with our resource partners and trying to go into college athletic departments potentially and work with them to develop additional curriculum, kind of go in with that team of financial, mental health, like career, sales, just different group of people, but extend out more than what they're doing. But not only for the current students, but also to help those alumni athletes as well, because as you know, a lot of times the alumni athletes typically get forgotten unless you're some superstar athlete.
Absolutely, yeah, and there's the mindset a lot of times at institutions of what have you done for me lately, and the way the economic system is set up, it doesn't. Unfortunately, there isn't the incentives or the it's not top of mind to make sure that athletes succeed in that next phase. Uh, USC had, and I think, and a lot more schools now they have resources for it. So we had athlete
Right.
support services, both academic and career, but a lot of times you're very strapped. You might have one individual covering 1,000 athletes,
Yeah.
and and how do you have set curriculum or experiences for each to help you figure out what your unique path is? That's hard to do. And coaches and administrators, they're focused on performance on the field a lot of times, and tragically, a lot of times people are put in places where sometimes don't even choose their major, or I mean, the stats around how many people set foot in their college career services offices are pretty bleak. I mean, and
Right.
the research we've done, it's 90% of athletes aren't setting foot a lot of times in those places to get those resources, and a lot of times those resources aren't catered for the athlete population.
Right. Yeah. No. And that's definitely something we're going to cover when we talk more about Next Play You. So let's talk about networking, connecting, and especially the importance of it while you're still playing.
It's essential, Rob, and that was, I felt like I figured that out relatively early, and I always kept the mindset of, hey, I have an interesting, I have a calling card as an athlete, so how am I going to use this to my advantage? Um, every person, I would always put myself out there in terms of interacting with alums, going to events, anyone that I could connect with. I found a way to have a conversation, seeking out people that were doing interesting things non-athletically, because a lot of times they want to hear from an athlete. So I think
Right.
that's one thing that I tell every person I speak with is, find people that you have rapport with. Find, everyone wants to college athletics is such a special time and such a special ecosystem. You have an interesting platform as an athlete. People are going to want to have a coffee. They're going to pick up the phone. They're going to interact with you. So I a lot of times I tell people, be deliberate with the number of people you reach out to every month, every week. That was, I think I did an okay job of it in school and didn't realize exactly as the strong of the platform that I really had at the time.
Yeah, and I mean that's great advice. And I mean, we've talked even to, I mean, imagine even starting like at the high school point of just your friends and their parents and just your coaches. I mean, we definitely encourage get to know people and do that networking, connecting. I mean, I was talking to one agent and he talked about from a professional perspective is that a lot of these athletes the best time to do it is when they are playing, like we just said, and they don't, and then they get done and they're kind of okay, well, where's my big job? And like, well, you didn't, it's not there. You haven't made those connections. It's so important to do that, and also to, I always talk about like kind of having that pay it forward, spirit too, just willing to give to others. And a lot of times people will think, oh, well, what do I have to give to others, and offer them their successful. You never know what it might be. And even from an athlete perspective, like you said, people are enamored by athletes. So even if it means that maybe that athlete might not have something to offer, like from a business perspective, maybe it's like that the person they're talking to, their kid wants to meet this athlete, or you never know. But you have to put yourself out there.
Absolutely. 100%. You as an athlete have such a unique platform, and people want to help, and it's a powerful time to interact with people in a way that you're not making an ask.
Right.
And when you're in a position of strength, frankly, and a position of interest where you can build authentically and just find real connections.
Yeah, no, and the key there, authentically, absolutely. So let's talk about, you kind of mentioned it there as we talk about networking, connecting. Let's talk about alumni engagement, which obviously at Alumni Direct is important to us. But when you were there, was the athletic department encouraging athletes to come back, and not just for for the homecoming or the golf tournaments, but like to come back and work with the athletes and help the athletes out?
So they're not really, Rob, is how I'd answer that. There was some, we had a mentorship program that was pretty nascent at the time. I wasn't even involved. A lot of folks hadn't really heard of it. It was just getting off the ground. You would have some recent grads at meets, some recent grads interacting with our coaches and people that were in the ecosystem. But there wasn't anything. There wasn't really opportunities to network and understand. And I think the thing about athletics is when you're in it, you're trained to think that that's all there is. Like you have to be focused on it, because if you don't, you may lose a step, or you may slow down, or you may not be in the zone. You have to be in it. And because there's so much attention and effort put on it, you think that you're what matters most as the athlete, and that everyone's there to see you. And a lot of times you have to have that confidence to be able to perform. That's part of the game. Being able to think about, oh, there are things after this, or interacting with people and being inquisitive and learning what did they do, what's their path. When that clicks for people, it is different for every person. And what triggers it? A lot of times, unfortunately for people, that's triggered when you reach hardship, and when you hit
Yeah.
that moment of hitting the wall, like, oh shit, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Whereas I think finding a way to get that ingrained in the process through coaches, through official alumni engagements, where you can learn along the way, hey, this is what this is part of the thing. Yes, I want to go pro in my sport. Yes, I want to be a top performer. But by the way, I'm going to go pro in something else. I need to be thinking about that. And that actually doesn't take away. That actually just adds to me as a whole person.
Right.
That's a tough mindset to be able to get at that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, today it might be a little bit better with some schools, but I think it's a two-way street. It's not just the school, it's the athletes wanting to come back as well. But I think the other thing that I've come across a lot of my conversations is just that there's a lot of changes at times within athletic departments. So new coaches come in, or new athletic directors. And so it kind of gets a little bit lost. And I think it's just a shame. I mean, I was on a conversation with a fellow alumni, and he very successful Hall of Fame player, football player from the school, played 10 years in the NFL, and we're on a call and just says, I'm willing to help, tap me in, like, why would you not use me? I want to help you. And so that's something to to look out for.
Yeah, that's the thing. Everyone loved their time at their university. It's such a special time in your life. Everyone wants to help athletes. We all remember when we got that first opportunity, or the first time we engaged with an alumni who helped us realize what we thought we might want to do, and we connected with someone. The question is, yeah, it's the incentives and facilitating that in a way that makes it accessible and makes it top of mind,
Right.
rather than like a just in time when it might be too late.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So now, I always like to, this is my wrinkle in my podcast that I added, I don't know, how about 10, 15 podcasts ago, but a couple questions, fun questions. So first one is, what advice would you give to freshman Jason?
Well, freshman Jason didn't. I was not performing like I should have been my freshman year. To be honest, I came in there a little bit cocky, but also not realizing what it meant to balance all the things and be on your own. So for me, I would tell that version of myself, focus on what's important. Focus on what's important, and ask the questions and learn from others that are ahead of you, and maintain that balance between confidence, but you need to realize you don't know how to handle that yet. So
Right.
I think for me, it was, I didn't, I assumed I could do it, and I assumed I knew, and yes, I could, but I needed to understand the how. And so I wasn't focusing on the important things, whether it was my diet, the right amount of time to allocate between academics, athletics, and social. I was a bit, there's a little bit of lack of discipline going into those new environments.
Sure.
And USC is a special place, and so I was distracted. I wasn't performing how I necessarily should have. I remember my first semester, academically, I was almost on academic probation, and I had an academic scholarship, and so I had to realize, hey, this is not. You have to do things a little bit differently. It takes a little bit of different level of discipline, and yes, there's more opportunities, which means you got to be more focused. So that's what.
Yeah, especially now we'll fast forward to what advice would you give to senior Jason?
Senior Jason, I would say connect with as many different people as you can, who you have rapport with, and who you admire what they're doing. And I would say this emphasis on non-athletes, because I think once I started to excel on the track and that became part of my identity, you get even deeper into that world, and that's what you're known as. But I would say go to those extra club meetings, interact with people outside of your circles. People want to interact with you as at being the position that you're in. You need to be able to kind of diversify the circles a bit, and even more so, and put effort and time into it, and everything's not necessarily going to come to you. So, and because I've realized being out, a lot of the people that I interact with in the business world, many of them I didn't even know at USC, because
Right.
we were in different circles. And so it would be, it's always good to learn and listen and learn to others around you, and continue to get that broad exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny, every time I ask that question, everybody's like, and they, one of the episodes, the athlete was like, well, which version should I give you?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, all right, well, we'll keep the PG version, right? So anyway, so now let's talk about transition out of sports, and obviously it's what we're talking about, a big part of this podcast. talk about all these years you've been running and all that, and you probably still run now, but when you were done, talk about going out into, like, you got into the finance world. Talk about that, your transition, any type of difficulties that you might have had, or like challenges, or again, it might have been just positive straight out.
Well, I because I had mentally prepared, and I felt like I completed. I definitely feel like I left things on the table track wise. I thought I could have performed a lot better than I did towards the end of my career. But I mentally prepared that the transition was coming, and I knew it was, and I was emotionally ready. I think that's important, and that's something I like to tell folks as well. Like, make sure you're emotionally ready for it. I fortunately was, but I definitely went through an identity crisis, and I had a large chip on my shoulder when I moved to New York right after school. So I was in LA, drawn to the finance environment. I had interned at JP Morgan, and I turned that into full time role. And very quickly, I realized that going into that analyst program and that environment, I did not have the typical profile of a lot of people that I was working with. Folks were from the Ivy League. Not a lot of people had been at that level of athletics that I'd been. Just different energy, and I felt like I had to prove it to others and prove it to myself that I could hang analytically, and in that type of a business setting. And so, had a bit of imposter syndrome, those early days, as well as I didn't know what I was really getting into. It was a whole new environment, as I think a lot of people can say when they first go into their careers. For me, it was, I deliberately chose roles and paths that were analytically leaning, or where I felt like I embraced the work on your weaknesses mindset as opposed to leaning into your strengths. So I went away from things that maybe I was naturally inclined to work on things where I felt like I could kind of get better, with the eye to what type of business leader do I want to be. And I felt like I had to work on my weaknesses. So the transition was relatively tough. It was tough in that you're navigating what it means to be in the real world, what it means to balance all those things. Like, the 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 balance that you have to have as a college athlete between all the pieces, I still kept that, and that still makes me feel my best self when I'm doing things at the intersection of analytics, business, athletics. But I realized that the real world doesn't necessarily work like that. When you're working in your career and you're working in your job, that's all you do. That's the one thing. People don't care that I ran the 400 meters. They want to
Right.
know how I get the pitch deck done. They want
Yeah.
to know the numbers tie out in the model. It doesn't. So I had to realize what learnings I can take from athletics, but also I need to perform in a different way.
Okay. And then, I guess, give a couple keywords of advice. And the first one you already brought up, you said, preparing yourself mentally. Give a couple other keywords to athletes as they move on, whether it's, out of college or professionally, but they're done with their sport.
I would say listen and learn. So I think, as many athletes have confidence in themselves as well as egos, and that's driven by a lot of your identity is wrapped up in that. So having that beginner's mindset, going in realizing you're at the bottom again, going in and being humble, and having the desire to be inquisitive and ask questions and start again. Feeling that it's okay to not know. It's
Right.
okay to be a beginner and not be comfortable again. It's okay to not know how to navigate, and asking questions is a strength. I think that's one that I would say, and that was a bit difficult for me, because you don't want to seem like you don't know. You don't want to seem that's an uncomfortable feeling. So leaning into that and knowing that's actually a strength, I would say that the athlete persona can help you, and find the ways that it can help you, not hurt you. And what I mean by that is for me, what I learned is it helps you with the applying the discipline, applying the tenacity, applying the ability to be part of a team, inspire people around you, coachability. Those learnings and those lessons are directly applicable. Whereas understanding the confidence, the um, potentially performing and pushing through, and maybe even being overconfident, like some of those things you have to learn how to, it's an art to learn how to I like to say maybe not outshine people around you in certain scenarios. Like understanding how your manager wants something done is a new concept that yes, you have a coach, but your coach, you're the star when you're out on the field. When your manager's there, you need to make your manager look good and do work that elevates them. That
Yeah.
concept is not something that applies necessarily on the track.
Right.
So it's learning those things and asking those questions, and kind of seeking mentors in a way where you can apply those positive elements of athletics that I talked about, but actually learn some of the new ones and differences that are nuanced.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's all key words of advice there. And now let's just we'll fast forward. So we'll briefly, like we talked, you got out of the space of being finance into techs and startups. So talk a little bit about that, and then how it ultimately got you to NextPlayU.
Yeah, I realized a couple years in my finance journey that I didn't necessarily see myself as a senior leader in that arena. And this is also something that a lesson I would give in perspective is look at your managers, look at the people that are running organizations. Do you identify with them? Do you want to be like them? Do you like how they operate? Do you have kind of values alignment? Those are all things to think about when joining an organization. And so I started to realize, one, that I was intrigued by the tech world. I was intrigued by the intersection of athletics and business. And for me, I started doing the reflection of, hey, what could I potentially be the best at? I was seeking again that feeling of being elite, and where could I be kind of the best in the world at? One of my mentors shared with me the what can you things be so how can your life be so synergistic that you are just kind of naturally in your flow state, and where pieces are coming together, and you're able to uh actualize by having different pieces come together. So for me, that's how I started on that journey. I ended up getting into Harvard Business School, and when I was there, I viewed it, many people view business school as a transition platform. And for me, I was like, hey, I want to explore tech and maybe the intersection of finance and tech, but also this athlete identity into the business world. That's something that I now felt like you knew pretty well. And I still saw my teammates. I saw people that I interacted with. I saw people across all sports, people I competed against, still struggling with that 5-10 years out of school, because they hadn't quite found that thing that they loved as much, or that was authentically as them as athletics were. And I said, there's got to be a better way, because those traits that I talked about before that athletes bring to the table, that's what makes you successful in the business world. It's just knowing where to apply them, and where can you outperform, and where can you gain success and find what's authentically you. So when I was in business school, I started thinking more and more, how do I use these platforms that I've been fortunate to be a part of to elevate others that come from where I've come from, and my unique experience. So I said, hey, we should bring athletes to Harvard. We should bring athletes to the business school environment. Let them benefit from learning, experience the Kth method, learn from other students, experience what's out there. And so we started a program. We started an academic focused program that we called Crossover to Business. It was a week on campus and then a semester long virtual experience where you get exposed to the case method, get matched up with current students as mentors, as a way to think about the rest of your life post sports through that business school lens. Incredible experience. We started that in 2017, and now there's been hundreds of athletes that have gone through it across all major sports. And that kind of started me on that journey. I then ended up thinking, hey, could this be a platform? Like, could this exist? It stayed within Harvard, but I meanwhile went into consumer tech companies, consumer tech startups. I ended up working at a software private equity firm, and then ended up working at Salesforce, an enterprise software company. And the same thing around that athlete identity and the transition and the how hard it was. I saw that same thing in tech. And again, I said, how do I use these platforms to expose other people, to give them the path that I fortunately have gone down? That's one thing that really drives me. It's one of my core values. So that was how I went about it. I started thinking, okay, how do we actually get athletes into companies? How do we actually create outcomes on the other end? Is there a way we could structure that through a business, through a community, and kind of create that bridge?
That's great. And obviously, that's the genesis of NextPlay.
Absolutely, yeah. That's sort of how NextPlayU has come to be. Through that journey, I met a few folks who have now become my co-founders and partners in the business. One of which, an individual by the name of Ryan Neese, who was a very successful athlete himself, played in the NFL for 7 years, son of NFL Hall of Famer Ronnie Lott, and he actually Ryan now runs a venture capital firm called Next Legacy Ventures, which is a fund-to-fund structure all around the intersection of using venture capital for good. And one of his core strategies is helping athletes invest in the sector and be in that ecosystem. We connected when I was working on the program at Harvard, because a lot of our athletes were going to his events and in the same ecosystem with him. And so we started thinking again more about this problem. There's better way to create these outcomes. I also met my co-founder Oren Gabriel through that process. Oren and I have a lot of mutual friends. His background also in the services industry. He was a management consultant for a while, worked in higher education in the UC system, and has always been a very values driven individual. And so we saw the same opportunity. He was an entrepreneur in residence at Legacy Ventures. And so we ended up connecting. We built the NextPlayU, and now it's come together where we're creating a specialized cohort experience catered around that athlete journey from athletics into elite business environments. And so we created a curriculum and an experience where it helps you understand who you are, where you want to go, and how to get there, and actually the skills that will help you thrive in that next phase.
That's great. And is it geared towards like college athletes, professional athletes, both?
Both. The key point is you're at that transition. So at least collegiate, we typically target seniors who are transitioning to their first roles after school, or you've played professional. Usually the sweet spot is 1 to 5 years. We've had athletes that have played 10 years of basketball overseas, even more. A lot of times is you have that emotional readiness again to transition. You've met that transition point, and you want to go and build a career, usually starting at entry level, in companies that are growing and expanding and value that athlete mindset and the athlete abilities.
So wait, is it, and then so you have like a curriculum and they go through a certain amount of time and then kind of help them to ultimately get to their next phase?
That's right. We have a 4-week group experience that we deliver through cohorts, all virtual. So athletes across sports, geographically dispersed. And we have a few elements where you focus on different parts of, one, understanding who you are as a person. So going back to that identity thing that we've talked about, who are you beyond sport? What drives you? What do you want to become? What's the path? And then we have a lot of exposure from athletes that have already gone on that journey themselves. People that were elite now are leading companies, now are investors, now are leaders in their industries, talk about their journey. And then we do a lot of skill building and training specifically around getting you into companies. So we partner with companies who view it as an incredible talent pipeline. And we cater our curriculum around that. So we work with a lot of tech companies. We work in a lot of sales roles. We work with some venture capital and private equity firms, and we're kind of growing and expanding. We ran our pilot end of 2022. And so now we've been accelerating cohorts and partnerships, and been really impressed with as we know, Rob, athletes are outperforming. And so it's starting to make the selling pitch easier, because now you're seeing the data around athletes are strong and high performers.
No, that's awesome. And it's, we definitely encourage people to check out NextPlayU, these athletes, because it's, as we've been talking about this whole show, just a lot of issues with transitioning out, but just that athlete skill set, the DNA, it's there, and companies want to hire athletes. And I think it's just getting them into the mindset that, it's a new game. It's the new game of life. It's the next level that they're going to play from that. So how do people find you?
We are at nextplayu.io is our website. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Jason Price. We have for athletes, when you're at that transition point, usually within a few months, we recommend applying to join a cohort. We have a written application. We do a screening process. We do some interviews. So on our website, LinkedIn, I'm available, excited for athletes and companies to join our mission.
Yeah, that's great. So we definitely encourage it. We'll have this in the show notes, and we encourage people. You can find us at alumnidirect.com, and we're on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, also across all the different podcast networks. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok. But this is an important topic, and it's been great. I mean, athletes like Jason just brings such a wealth of experience and knowledge to help athletes and transition out of sports, and it's just, athletes need to realize we're here to help. Like, don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, there's a lot of people that struggle, but there's a lot of people like us that want to help you out. So, reach out and encourage that, and watch it. So, Jason, again, it's been great. Really been a pleasure having you on this episode.
Thank you, Rob. Pleasure, and excited by the work that you're doing, and excited to help athletes and companies out there get to their authentic next step.